hello, Mark.
Hello, it's wonderful to be with you.
Wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for this interview and doing it again, because as I explained to all the beautiful co-creators watching my channel, unfortunately, and this is part of life, the interview we've recorded in New York City as you were on tour with Oprah Winfrey.
Yes.
On the Life You Want tour was deleted. I do not know, Mark, where this video is, and I thank you so much for redoing this precious, precious part and interview on the power of the heart and this beautiful wisdom that we have in the heart. You're, to me, an amazing teacher that is showing us and explaining us this power, this intelligence that we have in our heart. And you're, to me, I mean, of course, I'm excited about Baptiste de Pape's movie, The Power of the Heart, and you're in there, you're in that documentary. You have very, very precious information and teachings in there, but of course, this is just the iceberg of what you teach, because this is very, very deep. You wrote the Book of Awakening and Reduced to Joy and many other New York Times bestsellers. So I'm excited to dig into this. I guess you're excited about The Power of the Heart as well, and being in that movie.
Absolutely. You know, I just think it's a very compelling and touching movie, and I think Baptiste and Drew Harriet and the whole team, I think that they, and this is my experience of being interviewed for the movie, they embodied the power of the heart, which is why I think the movie is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's just not talking about the heart, it's touching the heart. And what they do, I think, masterfully is they've interviewed, you know, of course, me and other teachers, and they've woven some very compelling stories that are at once, of course, very individual, but in the depth, and we'll talk about this, in the depth of those personal stories, we find everyone's story.
Yeah.
And so they have beautifully told several stories, a constellation of stories, but have woven them masterfully to touch the story of all of our hearts. You know, there's only one story, and every one of our lives is a sentence in that story. And the great power of love and compassion and suffering is that it reminds us through the heart, through our vulnerability, through our fragility, through our resilience, that we are, in fact, the same. We are at heart the same. It doesn't mean that we are repetitive. It means that the way in the earth in spring, that every seed holds the flower or fruit or tree that it will show, every one of us holds the same seed of heart that living and loving and suffering causes to bloom.
How did you realize the importance of that and the importance of being in our heart and doing this journey from the mind to the heart? How did you realize how deep this was, how precious?
Well, I think, you know, humbly, as you know, and in my work I speak about it very openly. You know, I'm a long-term cancer survivor. I'm 63, and in my 30s, I went through 3 years of a period of very difficult journey and almost died. I almost died from the cancer and almost died from the chemo that helped save me. And that journey reduced me to what is essential. You know, at that time in my life, like anybody, you know, I was working hard. I was hoping to make some kind of contribution. I was beginning as a teacher. I was beginning as a poet. I hoped if I worked hard enough, I might contribute a couple of poems to literature. I might contribute in some way. And all of a sudden, life was changing me.
Wow.
All of a sudden, I was very humbled and just desperately wanting to get to tomorrow. And now, instead of trying to create great literature, all the gifts that I had been given around expression I was expressing and journaling every day, not to produce great art, but I was climbing it like a rope of expression that would get me to tomorrow. That would get me to tomorrow. And so I discovered, blessed to still be here on the other side, that the expressive journey of healing is more important than creating great art. That if I, in fact, am true to my experience of being human, which we can only know through the heart. You see, almost dying dropped me from my head to my heart. The way that I think of it is the way in spring, in like March or April, when the birds start to just come out and the flowers start, and that last remnant of snow melts into the ground. You know, suffering melted me from my head into the ground of my heart. And from that point forward, my mind has served my heart and not the other way around.
What is the reality, the day-to-day life when we're living from that space, Mark?
Well, the day-to-day reality is that we are constantly challenged to stay open to what matters, which is always around us. Now, being human, you know, we open and close. Even as we're talking, our eyes are blinking. We're inhaling and exhaling, you know. And so the heart also opens and closes, and the rhythm. Now, when we get hurt, when we go through pain or fear or worry, that makes the heart close. But our job is not to deny that. We're never going to get rid of that, but to be committed to opening after the heart is closed. That's the rhythm of daily life. That's the practice of return that every human being has to initiate and develop. And this is what I believe is a very personal spiritual practice that only the heart can teach us. And it actually, you know, it invites us into a quiet courage. Because even in our conversation, you know, I could be open-hearted or not, and maybe no one, or you could too, and maybe we would be so good at having conversation that maybe no one would know if we were open-hearted but ourselves. So in this way, you know, human beings have this amazing ability. We can be alive, and then we'll move to talk about aliveness, or we can be the walking dead. We are the only species that can shut down and still keep going through the days and having conversations, paying bills, and appearing interested when something isn't right. But we are also the only creatures who in a second can wake up again.
The cost is huge of not having our heart open.
It's very huge. And again, you know, this enlists and engages, invokes in us compassion and self-compassion, because it's not, you know, someone can be listening to us and going, well, I'm feeling kind of numb today. Uh-oh, what does that mean? Am I a bad person? I'm listening to this and, oh, I don't know. I'd like to be there, but I don't know a way out. Well, no, every one of us goes through this. Me too. Me too. We can talk today, and tomorrow I'll trip over the garbage, or I'll break dishes while I'm cleaning up the kitchen, and I'll feel disconnected. But the journey is to stop and open our heart again. Let me share a small poem of mine.
Yes, please. I love them.
and the poems, as you and I have talked, but the poems, I retrieve the poems by listening, and they become my teachers. It's not like I have this wisdom. Oh, I'm going to share this wisdom. I'm on the journey just like you, just like your listeners. And this is one of the ways that I keep learning. So this is a poem called Practicing. As a man in his last breath drops all he is carrying, each breath is a little death that can set us free. Let me say that again. Practicing. As a man in his last breath drops all he is carrying, each breath is a little death that can set us free. Now, the teacher in that poem for me is that we can't help but get encumbered by life. That's what it is to be here. It's messy and magnificent, and we get entangled and confused. But at any moment, the miracle of opening our heart, the quiet courage of opening our heart, which the movie The Power of the Heart demonstrates, touches us in this, is that at any moment, no matter how entangled I am, like that man in his last breath, if I have the courage, I can just drop everything and start over, like Adam or Eve, and say, oh my God, there you are, you're a human being, we're connecting, there's beautiful plants behind you. This is all real. This is all real.
Is this a matter of letting go, or of being okay with whatever situation there is? I mean, what's the little, not trick here, but the thing so that we can really be in the flow and being aligned and breathe?
Well, the challenge, and this is paradox, and you and I, we talked about paradox before, and let me say again that paradox is a great teacher. And paradox is simply said, but not simple to me, is any moment where more than one thing is true at the same time. And the mind can't solve paradox. It's not in its job description. The mind's a tremendous gift, but the heart can open itself and receive everything that's true beyond, no matter how it befuddles us, and by allowing it to enter our heart and hold it, it will reveal the logic of the heart and the spirit. So we are asked, in order to make it through surface life, the mind is an amazing problem solver. It can sort and prioritize and choose and make decisions which way to go, what to buy, what not to buy, who to be in relationship with, what's safe, what's not. We need these things to survive. But as I get older, I'm learning that the deeper side of all this is that the heart has the gift of letting us absorb and merge and integrate so that we can feel the deeper meaning of life. Sorting and prioritizing and choosing between feelings doesn't work. Only opening the heart. So every day, what does this translate to in everyday living? It means that when I am always, as all of us, we are always on the edge. We have to lean into what is ours to feel, because when we avoid it, we all know it gets bigger, whatever it is. And at the same time, not drown in it. We need to swim in the depth and live in the world. We need to swim in the depth and live in the world. Now, of course, no one knows how to do this.
The dolphins, I mean, I read your poem, Mark.
The dolphins do. But this is why we need each other, because, it seems that the design of life, the mystery of life, created by whatever name you want to give to what's larger than us, God, Tao, Buddha, Atman, Allah, nature, physics, whatever you want to call it, nothing. If you want to be an atheist and call it nothing, we're still describing what's larger than us. And whatever that is has made life just hard enough that we need each other. And that ensures the journey of love. Because, and this may be one of the deepest paradoxes of life, no one can live your life for you. No one can see what you see or feel what you feel or have to face what you face. And no one can make it alone. We need each other. And in that company, I learn who I am by loving and encouraging you to be who you are.
Is that compassion too?
That compassion literally means to keep honest company with. So now, certainly, like if we were together as we were in New York and you started to fall over, I could help you up. Or if you were hungry, I could get you food. But beyond that, in all the ways that matter that we can't see but we feel, I can't do anything but keep company with you. Bear witness to what you're going through and encourage you that your heart and my heart is the greatest muscle we have. It is unfathomable. Now, the heart is so sensitive and yet so strong.
Yeah.
So that in any moment of being open-hearted, we can feel, oh my God, I don't know if I can bear anymore.
Yeah.
But the spirit that makes the heart what it is says to us, not only can we, but it says, give me more. Always give me more. This is how in these amazing stories like Immaculée in the movie, you know, amazing inspirational story of how for all she went through, there was some resilience there. So let's talk for a minute about resilience. I would offer that resilience is the place where if I am open-hearted to the bottom of the very bottom of who I am, I start to feel everyone who ever lived. So when I am honest about feeling my pain, and I'm honest about holding you in your pain, then in that moment we touch into the moment that everyone who's ever loved has held anybody in pain. And now that sea of ancestors, that sea of voices, that is resilience. We touch into the community of the heart that exists across all time. All time. Anytime that I feel joy or that I allow myself to feel that I am a part of everything, feel it, not just to understand it. Likewise, I fall into that moment when everyone who ever lived, whether they lived in, in Africa or in Australia or in Paris or in America, whether it was in a rural time or in an urban setting, and anyone looked up at the stars and said, oh my God, I'm part of something so majestic and big. Now, when I feel that fully, I am in the moment that everyone ever felt that. And now we feel resilient. So another way to think of this, and thinking can give us a glimpse of this,
Yeah.
but opening our heart lets us experience it. So a way to think about this is to look at the ocean. So we all know that on the ocean, in the water, and this helps us understand, this is where water is a great teacher about how to experience our spirit and our psychology. So we all know that the top 6 or 8 inches of water, wherever it is always moved by weather. It's either calm, or it's churned up, or it's going back and forth, or it's choppy. But below that 6 or 8 inches or foot, it feels it, but it doesn't disturb the depth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would offer that that depth is our spirit, and that top foot or 8 inches is our psychology. That's the part of us that interfaces between our depth and the world. Now, remember, it's all one water. You can't just say, oh, well, if that's true, I just like to live in the deep, okay? You know, I don't want to be all this disturbed on the surface. Well, being human beings, we don't get that choice. We are always living in the world, feeling the circumstance, the weather of circumstance, and we're always living in the deep. So this is why when we are disconnected from the deep,
Mm-hmm.
which the heart can return us to,
Mm-hmm.
when we're disconnected from our heart or from the deep, boy, the turbulence of life just knocks us out, beats us up. It throws us around. We feel like, oh my God, how is this possible? All it is disturbance and turbulence. This is why all the spiritual traditions offer practices to try to reconnect us to that deep.
This is how precious it is, yeah.
Through meditation. Now, what meditation does, now, you know, there's so many great meditation teachers, but my own experience from different forms of meditation is meditation stills the mind so that there is nothing between the heart and the deep. And then we can start to feel the buoyancy of the mystery of life. And now it doesn't take away the disturbance of the surface, but it right sizes it. It makes it bearable.
I remember in our interview in New York, the part 1, because I'm going to put the part 2 and 3 online for everybody watching. That one is safe, and it will be uploaded online on YouTube. But part 1, we talked, Mark, about this aching. It aches to feel all that love and to bring it inside of us. There's a bit of aching, but it's an aliveness too.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that back up. So let's talk about that a little bit too. So first off, before we talk about the ache, let's talk about the aliveness. So, you know, there's so much wonderful conversation in our age about the soul's calling.
Yes.
What are we called to do in the world? What's our work? And, you know, I would offer as a way to discover that what I speak about in 7,000 Ways to Listen, one of my books, as the call of the soul. So the call of the soul, all the soul wants us to do is to be as alive as possible. Now we move in and out of feeling completely alive because we're constantly growing and changing. And the heart is the tuning fork by which we refine our aliveness. So, you know, every person has an unfathomable gift if we can just find it. And the heart leads us to it. How? By following your aliveness. Follow what brings you alive. When we're little, this is much simpler. This is much simpler. If I feel alive when I sing as a child. If I feel alive when my hands are in the earth, I just put my hands in the dirt. If I feel alive by moving my body, then I dance. Before anybody told me it was a dance. Then something happens as we grow. Then somebody, meaning well, maybe a teacher or a parent or a loved one, says, you know, you're really good at singing. You should become a singer. Or you're really good at spinning around. I saw you in the schoolyard. You should become a dancer. Or, you know, you seem to speak well. You should become a poet. Now, that's all, nothing is, that's all meant well. But what happens? What happens is that we move from being a verb to becoming a noun.
Mm.
The aliveness is in staying a verb. We don't have to become any, it doesn't mean in the world, yes, I've become a poet, but what keeps me alive, the whole reason I ever moved in that direction in the first place is because this way of inquiring into life brought me into wonder, made me feel alive. And so any effort to write is to try to keep the aliveness here a little bit longer and to share it. So we can always, we can always find the call of our aliveness by returning to what makes us feel alive. And it may change. It may change and probably will. So we are asked to constantly follow what makes us alive. So this leads us to the sweet ache of being alive. You know, when I was a child in school and you know, I felt, I didn't have words for it, but I know now I felt the depth of life. I had no words for it. And it was greater than any one feeling. And so, you know, adults around me looked at me and said, he's a somber little boy. You know, and meaning, well, they'd say, well, what's wrong, somber little boy? And I would just say, you know, I don't know. I feel something I can't see. And then someone said, well, you seem kind of sad. Why don't you cheer up? Well, and I spent a lot of time as a little boy, and most of us do, trying to cheer up. It's like, oh, well, maybe this deep presence I'm feeling isn't a good thing. So maybe I need to try to get rid of it. Well, you know, I couldn't get rid of it. And it turned out not to be a bad thing. And I learned as I grew, as I went into my teens and in my 20s, that actually sometimes it was sadness, but more often it was the depth of feeling this mystery of life that can't be named by any one feeling alone. And that actually this depth was the sweet ache of being alive. It's how I knew, even as a boy, that I was here and that I was part of something larger than me. And actually, this sweet ache of being alive, it's one of my oldest friends. It's how I know, how I feel the tug of the universe from my center. So you see, and it's not just in our time, but it's acute in our time, we've been taught to be afraid of the life of feeling, but it's the life of feeling that brings us to be able to feel and experience oneness. And when I do that, my compassion deepens, my sense of being here. And so this leads to what? This leads to experiencing eternity, not as living forever, not as year after year after year, but eternity is entering any moment so deeply and open-heartedly that we feel all moments that ever were and ever will be. The way a stone dropped will ripple in a lake. This is what living with an open heart can bring us to. And no one can stay there forever.
Yeah, this is where God is. Is that God? Is it a union with God in that place?
Yes, by whatever name you give that. Too often, I think we argue about what to call what's larger than us when we just need to find our own synonym. So if you believe in anything larger than yourself, then I would say you're a mystic. As soon as we start to try to name what that is, then everybody goes to their spiritual religious camps or scientific camps. And I'm not really interested in arguing about the names. I want to know, I want to compare notes with other live beings about, wow, what does that feel like? How do you experience eternity, God, Tao, nature, everything, so that we can compare notes about it, so we can be in the aliveness together, together.
In that space, Mark, there's really nothing for us to do. It's just about being, and if we're aligned, if we feel that way, if we're there, or just it's one step at a time. We're called to the next action. We follow our intuition. So it's like a flow. It's like a very fluid and liquid. Or
yeah. So this leads us to another paradox. You know, every age that we live in. You know, Charles Dickens started. The sentence that starts A Tale of Two Cities is, it was the best of times and the worst of times. And that's a wonderful novel, but I think if we only had the first sentence, it would be worth it. Because every time is the best of times and the worst of times. So we live in our age, as in every age, there are travesties, injustice, atrocities, all over. And whatever we can do, our small part, to try to make life better on earth while we're here is necessary. And how do we know what to contribute? How do we know where to contribute? It's because there is, this is the paradox, there is nothing to go, nothing to do, and nowhere to go. And once we accept that, we can do everything and go anywhere. So what do I mean by that? And so that's the end of a poem of mine called Accepting This, that I didn't know I would arrive at it, and it became my teacher. And what that means is that what we're talking about is when I can be fully here with an open heart, then my compassion is bottomless. And what compassion does is it changes our eyes. Now when we see with the heart, it's more clear how we can help. How we can help. So it's like we have to clean our eyes so we know where to help and what to do. You know, this leads me to a story that I don't think we shared when we were in New York, but I really felt it afterwards, because, you know, right where we were was at the very bottom of Manhattan, and we could see behind us the Statue of Liberty. And like so many people, you know, I'm of Russian Jewish, descendant of Russian Jewish immigrants, and my grandmother on my father's mother, and both my grandmother and father are now gone. And my grandmother was like a mother to me. And I realized, as you know, that morning when we were there, and the morning before, as I looked into the water, that my God, you know, over 100 years ago, she actually came right by that statue on those waters and stepped right there. And here, 100 years later, her grandson, here I am, you know. And there's a story from when she was in the last years of her life that bears on our conversation. She was in a hospital home situation in Brooklyn. And I would visit her. I lived about 3 hours away, but I would come and visit her as often as I could. And I came one day, a beautiful day like when we met, and I came into her room, one room she'd been in for months. And she was sitting on her bed, 94, with a thick Russian Jewish accent, always was the accent of her English. And she looked kind of, you know, gray and sad and waited. And I said, "Grandma, what's the matter?" And she said, "Oh, it's a gray day." Now, I had just come in, it was beautiful, and I thought, She losing connection with the things around her, what's going on. And then I noticed that she had one window in her room. And that window was dirty. It hadn't been cleaned in months. And I said, Grandma, it's a beautiful day. It's the window. I'll get the window cleaned and we'll go outside. We'll go in the courtyard. And she looked at me as only someone, almost a century old, who had crossed an ocean to live in another land, as only someone like that could chuckle. She chuckled and looked at me and she said, got a dirty eye, see a dirty world. Got a dirty eye, see a dirty world. So this profound lesson, which has saved me many times since Grandma has gone, this immigrant wisdom, this wisdom that comes from journeying across the deep from one land to another, this tells us that, yes, that weather of the surface, that being in life, all the difficulties, the injustices, the travesties, they're difficult enough. There will be legitimately gray days, but the first thing we have to do, whenever feeling confused or desperate or full of pain or full of fear, is to see if our eye is dirty, to see if our mind is dirty, to see if our heart needs to be cleaned, because only then can we see, as the Buddhists say, things as they are. And now, with the heart, we can see what choices of aliveness we can truly make.
Beautiful. So to really clean that window, there's meditation. We talked about it. For you, there's journaling.
There's meditation. There's honest relationship and friendship. When you lovingly can mirror to me who I am, can help me see what I can't see, you're helping me clean my heart, the lens of my heart. And I do the same for you. There's introspection, honest dialogue, meditation. There's just plain honest effort. The way we exercise physically, the aerobics. There are heart aerobics of exercising how we feel and perceive honestly. All of these. And so no one can tell anyone how to do this specifically. If anyone's listening and it touches you, then your individual responsibility as a spirit in a body in time on earth is to figure out, what does that look like in your life? What does that mean for you? What's the next step you can take to clean the window of your heart that releases the power of the heart, which brings us all the way back to this incredible movie, which is really what the movie is asking everyone to do. It's asking, by touching the viewer's heart, to awaken their aliveness and then say, you have the wisdom to know what to do with that aliveness. Don't waste it.
I would like to make a slight distinction, because it seems that sometimes we're aligning ourselves through music or playing with a little kitten or with a baby, and we realign ourselves. But there seems also to be this space that sometimes we don't really want to look at. So we're kind of forcing our way, not forcing, but realigning ourselves when there's some true maybe issues or things to work on. Is that true, or it just disappears by realigning with our heart and being always in our heart? Is there really a work to do in parallel of finding alignment?
Yes, and I appreciate your sensing that and leading us into that, because it's always both.
Yeah.
It's always both. You know, there was, I love this, I know whenever I work with groups and people and students, I always bring this up. There was an early Chinese teacher named Sen San, and in the sixth century. And all we know from notes and things is that he was a real curmudgeon, but very wise. And whenever his students would bring him a problem or a question, he'd listen and he'd go, not two, one, go away. Not two, one, go away. Now, obviously I didn't live then. I didn't talk to him. What I think he meant by that is that when we talked earlier about problem solving, when we problem solve, we need to make choices. That's how you make it through the land of circumstance. But how we find meaning and joy and aliveness is not by making these false choices. What he's trying to say to us is whatever it is before you, it's not either or, it's always both and. Even if it seems, oh, I have to be in this relationship or that, I have to choose between this job and that job, I have to choose to be this kind of person or that kind of person. No, his wisdom says, and this is the paradox, no, not two, it's all part of one indivisible, beautiful, complicated life. Now, once you feel that, now you can make real choices. So no matter what difficulty we're in, yes, it's always, so to go back to your sense here, that yes, there's these beautiful, peaceful alignments where we come into oneness by simply stilling ourselves, by feeling the joy of simple things. And there are always dissonances. There are always distances between inner and outer. There are always sufferings that need love to be poured like water on a fire. And so it's not two, it's one. We do work in our individual life. We are strengthening the immune system of humanity. We are healthening the cells of souls, the soul cells of humanity, to strengthen where there is infection and toxicity. And so we are always called to be and become, to be who we are, and then where do we offer a hand? And you know, Mother Teresa, I loved one of her anthems was that courage was doing small things with love.
Beautiful. To finish this conversation, I could last for hours. But I have your audiobook, so I'm just listening to you, but all the time. But you know, what is your sense? It feels like it's a little bit. It shakes a lot right now for a lot of people, and at the same time it's easier. We're called to be in the light, we're called to have integrity in our life, to open our heart. It feels easier, and at the same time it shakes more. So what is your sense of this period of time right now that we're living in, and how precious this is? Because it feels like we've got some help if we're just looking a little bit, you know, well, somewhere else than just on the problem itself.
Thank you for asking that, and of course I don't know, but I can offer what I feel. And you know, I feel that, as we mentioned earlier, in the context that every time is the best and worst of times, as I mentioned, Dickens said, and therefore our job in each generation is to inhabit our humanity, and through that our common spirit, so that we can make this time be a better time and not a worse time. So in every age, there are places where there is not compassion, which I believe is generated out of fear, out of isolation, out of pain. When people don't face their own pain and fear and isolation, then we replay it on other people and we extend the suffering. But when we can face our own life that is ours to live in all of its mess and magnificence, we actually lessen the violence in the world before we do anything else. And so we each have an opportunity, by the challenge and courage to live with an open heart, to contribute to whether this is a era of compassion or an era of cruelty. Which will it be in the time that we have together?
Yes. Beautiful, Mark. This was so enjoyable. I am so excited to air this right now and have it spread. This video goes all around the world and is shared right now. This is beautiful teachings. There's many books. Which one do you have particularly in the heart and mind right now that you would like to, the titles of your book? I know there's the Book of Awakening, Reduced to Joy.
And the Endless Practice,
the
Endless Practice, Becoming Who You Were Born to Be, which again we grow, we don't arrive, which is a lot of what we've been talking about. But 7,000 Ways to Listen. There's a book of mine, a little earlier book called Finding Inner Courage. So, but thank you, and you know, for keeping this conversation alive throughout the world with your work.
No,
it's a joy to be together. I look forward to being together again when we can.
We look forward to having you in Europe. You better let us know.
I will for sure.
And and for all of you watching this video, we would like to invite you with Mark to see part 2 and part 3, because they're absolutely delicious. The one on relationship is crucial, is magnificent and heart-opening, and the part 3 on your poems, of course, is delicious. We took that 5 minutes, it's a short video, but we dig into your beautiful poems, and it's always different to meet in person than on Skype, though I really felt the power and the beauty and the clarity of all your teachings right now through this interview. So thank you so much, Mark. You're a delicious thing. Oh my God, I'm so excited to have you on Earth right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lilou. Okay, and be well, and give my best to Baptiste.